I will sort that out later. Okay. And going live. It's Wednesday, June 7th, 2023. I'm Rym.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight we are talking about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. So, if you didn't look at the news and you don't live in the entire northeast of the United States or like eastern Canada, you might not realize that shit's on fire and New York City was covered in a like black and orange cloud of death all day today.
The AQI right now is 364.
That is at the levels where like it is harmful to health and life.
Right. According to airnow.gov, a level of 301 says everyone should stay indoors and reduce activity levels.
Yep. I mean, up until this point, the worst AQI I have ever experienced in my life was during a particularly bad burn in Malaysia while I was in Singapore during F1, like a decade or more ago. And it was around 400, 450. And when I stepped outside of my hotel, I literally collapsed into an uncontrolled coughing fit and had to stagger back into the hotel and could not leave my hotel for a couple days. It was...
I'm just saying, like, the thing that astonishes me is that, like, okay, let's say you got a campfire, right? And it's like, you can't stand downwind of the campfire. You'd be like, right?
Yep.
That's probably like AQI of a few hundred. Right?
Yeah, but you can walk around the campfire to get away from it.
And you don't have to walk that far away from the campfire before it's basically nothing anymore, right? It's like you got to get pretty close to like a charcoal grill to actually smell it, right? So the fires in Canada are so numerous and so large.
They said something like 90 million acres have been ruined to ash.
Right. So it's like if you are in this huge area, right? Like, you know, so, like an enormous area, like the entire like northeast of North America.
The
right?
sheer tens of millions of people affected by this.
But it's like anywhere in that area, it's still like campfire strength.
Like,
right?
So I cracked last night.
Hundreds of miles away, it's still campfire strength. What could it possibly be if you're right next to it, like you're right next to a campfire?
So you know what that is? You know what that is if you are near these fires? Because remember, my father was a firefighter, his father was a firefighter, and his other was a firefighter. I am the first non-firefighter in my family as far back as we know on my dad's side. And I know a lot about fires. If you're that close to that type of air quality, that is what kills most people in fires. Very few people are killed by heat or by burning. They are killed by that air. The air is just deadly to life. Full stop.
So it's, it's pretty bad.
This is a horrific, deadly situation. People are definitely dying, and we're going to find out about it later. Like, this is an absolute disaster. And it might not get a lot better in the foreseeable future because Canada doesn't really have a good way to control these fires. They are spending all of their resources right now just trying to fight the fires that are approaching settlements and housing and infrastructure. Most of the fires are so remote that they can't even easily get to them.
So I think what we got to do is here's the thing. People like, oh,
Giant Wall, big fan, nuke.
Hold on. The people are like, hey.
Ben Cars?
No. Well, I mean, the people are like, oh, these fires are caused by climate change because it dried everything out and then lightning hit the trees and then it doesn't rain and you have a problem, right? But you know what? Climate change can also be the answer. Because if we melt the ice caps, the water will flood all of Canada, and then they can't set on fire. So it's right. The problem is also the solution.
Waterworld was
in this non-equilibrium state right now.
Waterworld, the movie,
we could have less climate change and it would be problem solved, but more climate change would also be problem solved.
Yeah, Waterworld definitely portrayed a healthy quality of life for all the people involved.
Listen, Waterworld, whatever you want to say about it, was not on fire. The air quality was good. You could breathe on Waterworld above the water. Not under the water, but if you had your head above the water in Waterworld, at least you could breathe. Drinking, eating, those are problems, but breathing.
Yep. But the worst part is, no one can say...
Would you rather live on Waterworld or only Land World?
Yeah, I mean, both of them just kill everybody.
Only land world.
I feel
Land
like
only.
I would like the largest and most powerful things that have ever existed, which are human governments, to do something about this.
I mean, they are doing. They have the resources that they have.
Well, I mean, on a grander scale, they're not doing something about climate change. They're doing the bare minimum to prevent people from just rioting about it. And half the people don't even believe it's real.
No, it depends where you are.
But if you average it out, a lot of people don't believe any of this is real. But this is deadly, and we don't know when it's going to end. No one can forecast this because the fires aren't slowing down. More fires are likely to start. And for us in like the New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut area, the only thing that determines how bad it gets for us is which jet stream is active. And because climate change has fucked up all the models for like weather patterns, it can't really be predicted. So if the jet stream comes from the east, it'll actually keep the smoke away from us and our air will go back to normal. If it comes down and across like it is now, the wind doesn't blow the smoke away. It literally just brings more and more and more smoke. But if fires start in Pennsylvania, which are very likely because it's very similar conditions exist there, including something that if you've never heard of it that's terrifying called a dry thunderstorm, which is bad news bears.
Doesn't Pennsylvania still have the town where the coal is on fire?
Oh, yeah, that town's still on fire, Centralia.
Okay.
That fire is nothing compared to what's going on up in Canada right now.
Well, obviously, otherwise we'd smell it, right?
Yeah. So this is affecting Geek Nights actually, because like I stayed home all day. We live in a building that has really good like air filtration, and we have a bunch of giant HEPA filters. But despite that, and literally not going outside at all and running all these filters at max since yesterday, my throat hurts, my eyes hurt, like I am tired, I can smell burning. This sucks.
Yeah, it's like yesterday, it was like, ooh, that's bad, right? Wear a mask when you go outside. You know, don't go outside too much.
Today is literally don't go outside unless it is an absolute emergency.
Yeah. Today is like way, way worse. I didn't realize it was going to get twice as bad. Like yesterday, I could see the World Trade Center. It was a little blurry. I could see the Empire State Building, no problem, right? Today, the Empire State Building's gone. World Trade Center, gone.
Yeah, I was in a meeting earlier today, like for work. I was presenting this big thing.
The visibility is like half.
Just toward the end of the presentation, it suddenly, like over the course of about a minute, got so dark that I assumed like a huge cloud came over or something. I didn't think much about it because I was focused on my work. And it just kept getting dark and dark. And finally my meeting ends and I stand up and like go look behind the screen behind me, and it's just orange outside, like this deep orange, like I'm wearing sunglasses.
Yep. Yeah, it was orange for a little bit today around like 2-ish, but then it stayed, the visibility kept declining, but the orange became white again. So I don't know what causes the color change.
So that is caused by the angle of the sun and the relative amounts of the different sizes of particles in different layers of the local atmosphere. Again, firefighter dad, like
so I guess at 2:00 the sun angle made it be orange, but then not anymore.
Yep. But also the density of certain particles might have been different, and the air might have been static for a while.
I don't know. It's just getting real. It's still getting worse. It hasn't gotten better since 2. It just got less orange.
So I guess what I'd say is if the AQI, which you can look up in most places, around you, in the place you are for the foreseeable future, is above 100. Now, above 50 is already not great for people. Like, that is already a problem. But if it's above 100, I am earnestly imploring you to not go outside if you can avoid it. And if it's above 200, don't even like work out or like exercise or even do anything strenuous indoors. Like, do as little as possible, because particulate matter, this PM 2.5 metric, those are particles so fine that it's not just like they get in your lungs and make you cough. They can cause permanent damage to your lungs. And
it's like if you go outside today, it's like that's might as well be the same as like deciding to start smoking tobacco today.
Probably worse because of the sheer density and the fact that your lungs don't get a break.
Well, and the fact that if you smoke cigarettes, it's like you do that.
This would be like
a chain smoker. You do that a few times a day. You're still right.
Yeah, this is not like smoking a pack of cigarettes. This is like every single breath you take is through 3 cigarettes simultaneously all day.
Yeah.
This is like Donald Duck smoking those cigarettes in that one Disney cartoon. Like this is rough. And
one thing that does bother me though is that, when the AQI is bad, right? I guess, in this situation it's a little different, but when the AQI is bad, the warnings are always like, don't go outside, don't exercise, don't go biking, don't go walking, don't go running, right? And it's like, those are true. You shouldn't do those things because you'll mess yourself up, right? But when the AQI is bad, shouldn't they say, don't drive, no cars right now, right?
Well,
in this situation, cars are dropping.
Well, so they did, because there is a line when it gets to the red and purple areas, which a lot of people learned about the purple and maroon colors that they've never seen before on those charts. But when it's above 200, then yes, the advice actually is do not go anywhere under any circumstances.
Right, but it's not about just going anywhere. It's like, they should, anything that burns anything, right, should just be like, all right,
so
stop burning things.
In China and Singapore and even in like in other countries, yes, like in China, in many regions, when the AQI is above a certain point, there is a ban on barbecuing food. Like there is a ban on certain people driving.
Whereas in New York, the AQI was bad yesterday, and we saw a fire on a roof that we don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure a fire on a roof in a fancy building like that is likely.
So again, I'll say it on the show to put it on record, because I could be wrong, but based on the video and the photos I saw of that fire, I am very like 80% confident that was a gas grill that caught fire and set other things on fire.
Most likely explanation, because it was a fancy building with a fire on the roof.
But the key is there was a bright yellow concentrated fire and a darker like orangish fire around it, and there was a concentrated plume of white smoke and a separate, more diffuse plume of black smoke. That tells me gas fire was secondary adjacent wood fires.
Maybe, but the point is,
it's
grilling.
Yeah.
Even if that person wasn't grilling, there was definitely grilling going on in New York.
No, if the AQI is above 200 in New York City, there should be, just like during a blizzard, you will get a ticket if you're driving your car and you are not going to the hospital because there's an emergency.
Yeah, like literally anything that has an exhaust should be temporarily banned in this situation. Because even though it's a minuscule improvement over...
how many millions of people live in New York? If 10% of them are if 1% of them are grilling, that's a material increase in an already dangerous situation. And those people are outside hurting themselves. And I don't think people realize. I saw people like jogging outside. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, no, I think I don't know what people...
Well, people don't know. I'm going to say...
Don't read news. They know, like this, the whole thing is, you can see this hell happening outside. They just don't even recognize it.
They just don't even think... I would get... I'm going to say, my guess, based on the people I have talked to today, I would guess that less than 10% of all adults in New York have ever heard of AQI before.
Okay.
So, yeah, this is...
Notice they look out the window and they say, oh, that's normal.
Yeah. I mean, a friend was just talking about someone they knew who was just complaining about like, oh, the smog's really bad. Like, why doesn't the city do something about this? They're like, buddy, that's...
Did you see the mayor this morning?
Yeah.
He's a shitty mayor, but like...
Like, even the shitty mayor, like that fucked up, mostly broken clock is right 3 or 4 times a day. Like, he's pro bike lane.
Situation, let's go.
Yeah, he's pro bike lane, and now he's like, yo, don't fucking go outside.
He's pro bike lane, but he hasn't delivered on his bike lane promises.
Yeah, well, the bike lanes are progressing more than they were before, but...
The point is, it's like, why doesn't the city do something about this? There was a huge emergency press conference this morning with a whole thing going on.
City's doing a lot, most of what it can, but the city could go further. We should say everyone should work from home like COVID times until this is resolved.
We should sue Canada for damages.
Yeah, of course, arguably, the fires in Canada are being caused by climate change. And you know who's causing climate change? You know who are the biggest offenders? Meat production, particularly beef, cars, and underdeveloped countries who arguably are using practices that are the best they have available because more developed countries will not share their technology and help them.
Well, we can at least force the first two to pay for it.
Yes, we should sue beef. Literally, it's not even just meat, it is beef. Beef causes a huge percentage of all of this. If we just reduced human beef consumption by like 20%, that would materially impact climate change, even more so than heavily restricting cars. Like, the this is I guess if we got to move on to the rest of the show, and this is a Wednesday, but it always bothers me when it's not that the solutions are easy, but there are obvious, relatively straightforward, objectively achievable ways to mitigate problems at a wide scale. And we as a collective human society can't even do that.
All right.
All right, in some animation news, there's a ton going on. So, Hayao Miyazaki's presumably last film. This is what his
last for real this time, guys.
final 123.mp4
coming out next month, and
July 14th in theaters.
I thought he was gonna die and like just keep improving it and polishing it until he died, and then it would just ought to be released in whatever form it was in at the time.
I didn't know when it was coming out.
I guess he's releasing it, and he's alive despite chain smoking.
Yeah.
his whole life.
So I noticed this news because it was like, how do you live will not have a trailer? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I skimmed this article and read the article. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. You've just got to read it. This is densely packed with buried leads and fascinating things. But basically, the article is about why there is no trailer. Ghibli, they are not going to release a trailer or even a plot synopsis. The movie is just going to appear in theaters.
It's a book that you can read. It's available in English. It may be a book club book one day.
Yep.
I don't know, right? But it's like it's based on you don't need to make a trailer for something when there's a book. Anyone could just read the book and.
Oh, even better. So the producer at Ghibli, Toshio Suzuki, gave an interview where he actually talked about this a lot, and he basically said him and Miyazaki are done with full-blown marketing cycles. They don't have the energy for it anymore. Quote, you get tired of doing the same thing over and over. We wanted to try something new this time. But he went further and said something I think is really important. He remarked, and I'm quoting the article now, if audiences are interested in watching something, they don't need to see trailers to be convinced. And nope. I respect that. I mean, like Breath of the Wild 2, Tears of the Kingdom, all Nintendo had to say was, Breath of the Wild 2 is coming. It's called Tears of the Kingdom. It'll be out on this date. They could have said nothing more. They would have sold the exact same number of copies.
Well, hold on now. There's a little... All right, so I would have bought it for sure.
Yeah.
Right? But I had, like I said during the episode, I had suspicions. I was worried it might have just been sort of like not a huge difference between that and Breath of the Wild, right? And I'm right. But so there are some people who might have been on the fence. And so they had to show a little bit of proof that like, no, this is a big leap. It's a new deal.
I see where you're going.
Additional people on board.
My
right?
counter argument is that a pro move would be you still have a marketing blitz and trailers and everything ready to go, but you release those when you release the thing.
No, I think the pro move would just be don't do the ads, right? Other than to say a new Zelda is coming on this day, right? And then if they're hesitant people who aren't sure, they're not just going to buy any Zelda sight unseen. At the first wave would play it and be like, oh shit, and then that would be free marketing, and then the second wave, and then in the end you sell the same number of copies, just maybe a little slower.
But a Miyazaki movie, I think, is a little bit different because a Miyazaki movie is a particular situation where 100% of the universe of people who care about this know it's coming and will see it when they find out about it.
Yeah, it's like if you're already... it's like if no one's ever heard of you, right? Well, then obviously you need to do some kind of hustling, right? Even though we don't believe in ads and like ads, it's like if you're trying.
Now that hustle could be press releases, interviews.
Yeah. But it's like you got a capitalism to some extent, right? But if you're already Miyazaki, it's like the marketing that you've already spent on all your previous movies and all your previous movies already existing and already having been seen are the advertising for the next one, right? It's like, that's the reason we don't need an ad for the new Zelda. It's because I've played other Zelda, so you don't need to advertise. You just need to say, hey, another one, right? So when you've seen 10 Miyazaki movies, 10 Ghibli movies, and it's like, hey, another one. That's all you got to say. You don't need to do the big marketing thing because it's already set.
Yep.
But if this is a new studio, a new director releasing the exact same movie, right? Then you wouldn't be able to get away with that.
So he basically
if you want a capitalism at least.
And the best part is what he said was this also influenced him to choose a minimalistic approach. There will be no film spots, no TV spots, no newspaper ads, nothing. Just this visual will do. And then there's a link to
you need a poster.
Yeah, so that poster of the bird looking thing is the sole artifact that exists in public about this movie, other than the book itself, if you want to go look at it.
Yeah, you need to have a movie poster. Otherwise, people go to the theater and they're like, which one, right?
Yeah. But the movie poster for me could have been Miyazaki made another movie, and it's just a picture, and I would have been like, okay.
Text, yes. And then you're getting free advertising because movie theaters are going to say now playing Hayao Miyazaki's, right?
Yeah.
And movie reviewers are going to say, I saw this movie, 5 stars, 4 stars, right? And then, people on the internet are going to be like, hey, right? So you're going to get free ads that way. You don't need to pay for, other capitalists. You don't need to basically give free money to TV stations to get ads. You can just make more profits.
Yep. In fact, you basically, it's almost a Gabbo situation where you're sort of tricking everyone else into advertising your thing for you.
Well, they do that anyway. It's just, that's all the advertising you need because you're already.
Yep. So in some other news, Image Comics is leaving Diamond Distributors.
Right. So we years and years ago, right, a long time ago, comic books were sold on the newsstand, right, like next to the newspapers and the magazines, and all the kids bought them. And then when comic books, sort of fell by the wayside, right, they got rescued, right? The only way they were able to survive was through direct distribution. Basically, we're going to sell them to comic book stores only with this wholesale plan, and that way the margins work out for everybody, and we can keep comic books going that way. And that's why comic book stores came into existence, and you didn't see so many comic books on the newsstand, right? And then the manga times hit, and suddenly all the bookstores were selling all the mangas. And we complained on Geek Nights for about a decade, and every other comic book podcast has been complaining for several decades. Like, hey, this direct market distribution thing is fucking everything up. It's not good anymore, right? Now it's a problem, especially since it's all through this one distributor, Diamond, right? They have this monopoly. They got a stranglehold on the comics industry, holding back, changes and improvements to the way comic books on dead trees are sold to the people in the United States and in other parts of the world. And that's holding back the art form and et cetera, et cetera. So it was only not, somewhat recently, year ago, right? So Marvel, DC, right? Dark Horse, the biggest publishers finally ended their exclusive agreements with Diamond, right? And maybe they retained some Diamond relationships, but mostly left ship, right? Marvel is now being distributed by Random House, IDW and Dark Horse are as well. DC went to this other distributor called Lunar, and now Image is also going to the Lunar one who distributes the DC comics. And so, this open, the fact that this is now basically all the big, like significantly big comic publishers in the United States and other, right, are now not with Diamond exclusively anymore. The only ones left at Diamond are like Boom, Dynamite, and like, some other pretty small, the smaller end ones, right? Like medium at best. And so, it's like the end of an era. And we're still seeing like what impact this is going to have on comicdom, right? And I'm not really sure, right? It's like, I feel like this move to have a big impact had to happen a longer time ago.
Yeah, because like comic shops aren't what they used to be. Like the whole ecosystem has changed so much in the past 20 years that...
Yeah, it's like people are just reading, people who want to read comics are going very digital, even more so these days.
Yep. I mean, I was reading Chainsaw Man digital. I was reading that Keanu Reeves one digital.
Yep. It's like you got the webtoon thing is really where it's at right now. People can basically make web comics and make money on webtoon somehow, right?
With a big asterisk of, does anything make money and will it last? But I don't want, that's just an asterisk on literally everything.
Make good money on webtoon, right?
Yeah, but will webtoon itself continue to exist and be profitable long term?
It's been doing great for quite a few years. So, but yeah, it's like, personally, right? I think what happened to me is that there was this long period of time when I was a kid, there were a lot of comics I wanted to read, but I didn't have a lot of money. And then, there was access to comics decreased, right? And then it wasn't until like around the time I finished college, I had a job, Geek Nights was beginning. I had money, I had access to comics again. Comics were like booming at the time. And I was able to acquire and read many comics, and I caught up on all these old comics, right, that I hadn't read for ever, because I didn't have I wasn't at the time. And then it took me a long time. I was ordering reliably comics every month for years, decade or two, or like since like 2006, right? Like I put in orders for comics every single month. And it wasn't until like last year or so where it was finally like, there's nothing on the order form that I want this month. Like just nothing. It's not worth ordering anything. Why? There's none of these comics. Even if I buy them, I'm not going to read them. I don't got room, right? And nowadays, basically, I'm only buying comics that are made. I still prefer to read a comic on a dead tree just because the digital is not perfect, right? It's still, text. Yeah, of course, I'm going to read digital, no problem.
But like now I've got such a backlog of dead tree comics that I bought a long time ago or got like full compilations of things that are just sitting there that I haven't had time to read anyway. Yep. I'm kind of going to dig into my backlog.
No. So, but yeah, and there are some cases, for example, comics I've read recently, right? There was the Mike Allred Silver Surfer that I've wanted to read for a long time. And I was like, you know what? I'm finally going to go and read that. And it was terrific. Sure, maybe Rym will read it. We could do an episode on it. But it's available in this omnibus edition, which is like costs a fortune, right? So I'm like, you know what? Wonder if I can get it cheaper or illegally, right? And if you buy the Kindle edition, it's like a third of the price. It's like $30 instead of 100 something, right? And I read it on my giant iPad, and that there were some parts where it wasn't ideal, like big spreads and things like that, right? But for the most part, reading on the giant iPad was just fine, and I saved a lot of money. There's a manga I wanted to read for a long time called Oyasumi Punpun, Good Night Punpun, right? I just never bought it. It's like these 8 big volumes. And I was like, you know what? Does the library have it? Sure enough, the library had most of it, right? And I'm just like, get it at the library, return it. It's I like it. I'm reading it. I just don't feel the need to own it or pay money for it, right? So library is great for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I just been not ordering. There's still some months where I order some comics, and other months I just, and when I do order, it's like way less. I'm just not seeing things on the order form, right? That like I feel like I need to, go get, and I'm not going to be able to.
Of course, part of it also was that was an era of like the fact that you had an order form and a cadence to it that was not tied to your life. It was tied to the publication cycle. And we're back in the mode that all other media is of, I should consume that piece of media, immediately purchase or acquire it via whatever means at the time, as opposed to a schedule.
Because of Diamond, right? The ordering months in advance was the way to get these things for a significant discount.
That is true.
And I can still do that even without Diamond, right? You still, your retailer is still, has some kind of similar arrangements with whoever the distributors are, right? You're not buying from a distributor directly. But it's still, it's like, well, there's other way, it's like the discount by pre-ordering the giant omnibus early is not as good as the discount of just buying the digital one.
Yeah.
So, or the discount of going to the library and getting it for $0, or right.
Also, just not like if I'm buying something, not having it take up the space because all my bookshelves are full. Any book I buy, book has to go away somewhere.
Yeah, I'm going to go through again probably, and, I got a pile of books.
Oh, Emily, we carried over like hundreds of dollars worth of books to book off. Like, we got a pile of money from them.
I got a pile that's the pile where I need to read it once, and then I can get rid of it, and then I'm going to make there's another pile where it's like, yeah, I'm never going to read this again. It can go, right?
Yep. The only things I really
feel that strongly about it.
I only keep special important books, historic books, things like Sanctuary that I'll never get a physical copy of again in my life.
Yeah, there has to be some, for me to keep the book, right? At least once I put through the effort to go through the shelf, right? It has to have either I'm going to read it again, it has some significance, it's very hard to obtain it in another format.
Yep.
Something of that. There has to be some, reason. But, I guess there is value, though, in just having, some books around, even if you've never read them or even if you never plan to read them, right? It's just, I don't know. Anyway.
But anyway, things of the day. I bumped into this just kind of randomly, and it's in the same genre as like the Juggernaut video or Thundercats, that type of do a funny voice dub over an
Pokemon.
Yep, over at like an animated show, especially an old one. This one's with the old My Little Pony, particularly the My Little Pony and Friends. I think there was a movie or 10 episodes. Just like, I don't know. I never watched any of that old pony
I don't know
stuff.
anything about old My Little Pony, other than that it was a thing.
Of that genre of entertainment, this is one of the better ones I've seen for a few reasons.
I agree.
It's only 1 minute and 22 seconds long, so it doesn't beat around the bush. Like, Thundercats is really funny, but you could edit that down to be like a third of its length and it would be just as funny. Juggernaut, you really only need 2 scenes in Juggernaut. Also, Juggernaut has a lot of unfortunate dialogue that is best forgotten. Like, I wouldn't revisit it in a modern era. But the End of Honeysuckle is concise. The voice acting's good and funny. And that is the plot of that season, as far as I can tell. Like, it is that stupid. So I laughed out loud. This was actually legitimately funny, and I appreciate this, and I think everyone should watch it. It's worth 1 minute and 22 seconds of your time.
All right. Well, my thing of the day is worth 15 minutes of your time.
Ooh.
It's on the New York Times
Oh, yeah, the bagel thing.
YouTube channel, right? And basically, they do this profile of a man whose only job is to be a bagel roller. He rolls the bagels by hand, right? And not a machine rolled bagel, a hand rolled bagel, right? This man rolls thousands of bagels, right? Like daily. That's right? He only works like 3 to 4 days a week, and for several different bagel shops, he goes in and he rolls bagels, right? Like, that's such a tiny skill, right? Such a narrow expertise of like prepare dough, roll bagels, right? And then that's all he does. And it's a pretty amazing to see, like, this person's life story, how they ended up there, right? How they roll the bagels, is the work's really hard, but also, a satisfying craft, right? All in of itself, right? And even though you're doing, I guess, what some people might consider like low menial labor, right? Or whatever, right? It's like that person is like putting food in the mouths of thousands of, right? And it's
well, also just watching a human being exhibiting, even if it's a narrow skill, such mastery and expertise of that skill.
And this person rolls a bagel in like 2 seconds, and that one bagel, like that, that the machine mixes the dough, right? It's like he rolls a bagel in 2 seconds, and that 2 seconds of his hand going back and forth is like bringing someone like a whole breakfast of joy.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like, bam. It's like to produce, if I could produce joy at that rate, like if you look at the joy per work, right? It's like, imagine how much work someone has to do to make a movie.
Yeah.
A movie brings great joy to many audiences for 90 minutes, right? And millions of people see it. But the work that went in to produce, right? The ratio there, right, is maybe not that big a ratio, right? Because it's like the amount of work to make the movie is immense. Whereas, okay, the amount of joy of eating a bagel for 10 minutes might not equal the 90-minute best movie you've ever seen. But a person, all they had to do was move their hand back and forth really fast.
Yep.
Right.
Well, we did that. We did that panel way back on like Take Your Turn and like time in games, but we had that point around a game that's pretty fun. That takes a minute to play is by some measures objectively better than a game that's more fun but takes 30 minutes to play.
Right. It's like the joy and the factory that is this person and the joy they produce via bagels is incredible.
Yeah.
And if you read the top comment,
I was about to mention that. I clicked read more and read that whole comment just now.
Right, so a lot of people are coming out like, oh, this guy, his labor is being treated poorly. This guy's slaving away in the basement making bagels. The top comment is from the guy who owns the bagel shop, who would be, I guess, the man.
Yeah.
And he's like, nope, I realize that basically I depend entirely on this dude. I pay him a lot of money, and I'm good to his family, et cetera, et cetera. But to be fair, he should just give the guy the bagel shop, because what do you do, an owner guy?
Yeah.
Right? What do you do? Some paperwork?
Oh,
right?
that's right into some communist. What does capital provide?
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, don't worry. The bagel guy is doing all right. Right? They know his worth. He knows his own worth.
Yeah.
Right? He could go, if you can hand roll. So few people have the skill at this level. If you out there listening think that you can roll thousands of bagels in a day, several days a week, you could walk into New York City and like name your salary at any number of bagel places, right? Because there are not that many people that can do that.
Yeah.
And when you roll a bagel in 2 seconds, they pay you, 6 figures. But every time you roll a bagel, they're making like several dollars. But your 2 seconds, right? It's like, how much do you want to be paid for 2 seconds to go ba-bam with your hand, right? $1? Fine, I'll pay you $1 every $1,000. I'll pay you $1 a bagel because I'm selling them for, right? No problem. So.
In the meta moment, the Geek Nights Book Club book is no longer the Satanic Verses, but it is now the recommendation from one Bigelous Dickless Wolfwood. I will never get over that account and that situation. This is how you lose the Time War. We don't have any cons coming up. Expect to see us at PAX West. I booked hotels.
Cons coming up. See us at PAX West, the con that's coming up.
Yeah. Maybe I'm thinking about going to Kineticon. I might actually go and do some panels. I'm going to talk to them and see. That's an easy day trip.
I could be convinced if it was very convenient.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see about Kineticon.
Kind of hassle, then I'd be like, But if it's like, very convenient to go to Kineticon, it's as convenient as it can be given the circumstances, then maybe I could do it.
Would be weird to be at a Kineticon and not be literally responsible for like a huge percentage of the entire convention's content and just be able to walk around and look around. That would be a weird situation just because I've never really experienced that. Also, PAX Unplugged is going to come up toward the end of this year. And MagFest looks like it's happening. Dates were announced. So if you're not going to book a hotel in
the MagFest dates have been slightly adjusted. It's like a week or two later than usual.
I got a hotel room because I do plan to go to this MagFest and do panels and get back to our old bullshit. So stay tuned for those kinds of updates.
Well, we'll see what happens. I may or may not go, but we'll see what the circumstances are with how MagFest is doing things, right? We don't know if the mages are still there or what, right?
Yeah, they were last year. I was talking to them. They were. I sent my regrets that we weren't going to come because of the world situation. But I think I want to go to this MagFest and get that ball rolling again. But let's dive right into Spider-Man. Now, just because, Spider-Man, but we'll avoid spoilers for this movie until toward the end of the show. We'll tell you where the spoiler line is.
I don't believe in spoilers, but I do want to say, actually, the plot here, the spoilerable plot is it's solid, right? It is solid.
I'll agree with that. It is
plot.
When you start to see where it's going, it's a bigger and more poignant and complex plot than I expected, and it also works on sort of an allegorical level about
we're gonna
comics.
Talk about that. But the point is that the plot is, of all the reasons to see the Spider-Man movies, the 2 animated ones, the Spider-Verse-y ones, right? The plot is the last reason.
No,
right?
This is the best. I'm going to say straight up, this movie, the best cinematic animation I have ever seen.
I mean, it's tough to say.
I say that only because I struggle.
Because the Akira people did not have the luxury of.
Yeah.
Right?
So if I ignore effort, technology, if you ignore how a movie came to be and just look at what hit my eyes, I struggle earnestly to name anything I have seen that stunned me visually to this degree.
Right. I think, I don't know if this is too big to say, it might be going too far, right? But it's not an extreme hyperbole to say that this is some sort of revolution in the medium of animation, akin to when people learned how to paint in perspective, or when video games were suddenly not 3D, like Mario 64. It's
when
Mario
first
64 wasn't actually the first 3D game, but I guess Quake, right?
It might be more analogous to when first-person shooters went from everything is brown and gray to everything is ultra realistic to things can have colors and games can be weird.
Yeah, but it's that sort of big leap, right? The same way that there was a big leap, in open world games with Breath of the Wild, right?
Yeah.
This is a a big leap over, in a way you could say like, it's similar to Breath of the Wild, which, right?
Yeah.
There's two of them, right? There was
Yep.
Breath of the Wild, and
the first one was the best Zelda game to ever be made. I'm just going to say it because I think it was.
The first one comes out and is like, sort of shows the potential of the revolution and, sets the stage.
Yep.
And then the second one trampolines off the first one.
Yeah,
right?
like
Spider-Man. The first one comes out, sets the stage, shows what can be possible, and the second one jumps off the trampoline of the first one and is like, that was the set, that was the appetizer, and now I'm the entree.
Yep. Spider-Man 2 is materially better animated than Spider-Man 1, and I say that already agreeing that Spider-Man 1 is already one of the better animated things ever made.
So this movie starts out, right, in the Guggenheim Museum, right? And in the Guggenheim Museum, right, on display are the works of many artists, right? I like when the Jeff Koons dog breaks and all the dogs come out of it.
And then that one guy was like, whoa.
And they're fighting a vulture who's from like the Da Vinci universe, who's made out of Da Vinci paper. It looks like, what's the thing called where, what's the name of the Da Vinci thing with the dude with his arm stretched out?
Oh,
I don't know what the name of it is.
The guy, the David guy.
No, David's Michelangelo's statue.
Yeah, but what's the name of that guy? Da Vinci
I don't know
Man.
what the name of the Da Vinci thing is with the guy.
Vitruvian Man.
Okay, yeah. So it looks like it's the Vitruvian vulture, basically.
Yep.
Right? Who's in the Guggenheim. So you have a dude based on one artistic style, right? From the Da Vinci universe, causing a ruckus in a museum, right? Messing up all the art of all these different artists, right? And complaining about these other artists.
Yep. And you've got a full-on Spider-Man dialogue going the whole time, but
all of this different art is being drawn by one set of artists who are the artists animating it, right?
Yep.
Doing all these different styles, right? And you go from that to instead a multiverse of Spider-Man, right? Where each universe is some sort of different art style, right? All coming together.
So Spider-Man 1 had a revolution with that animation style and the chromatic aberration, like the way they did it, it was itself revolutionary. But then they also had
aberration means.
No, the chromatic aberration effect that they used heavily in that movie instead of some 3D effects.
Not really. I don't know if it would be called. That's the correct thing to call it.
I think that's what I would call that. That's what I've seen other people call it. There are other effects that are also at play, like the 2D effects that happen around the 3D characters. There's a lot going on. But then you had a handful of Spider-Men from other universes that had different artistic styles. And in the first Spider-Man movie, those characters were animated in different styles. Spider-Verse 2, took that to the absolute absurd extreme. You've got thousands of different Spider-Men all in their own styles, and you go across a bunch of different Spider-Verses where the background and the setting itself is also in a different style. Like Spider-Gwen's Spider-Verse is a completely different style from Morales' Spider-Verse.
Yep. So you have that as like your stage setting, right? And then you basically get into this commentary, right? Where it's like, look, people have been telling the story of Spider-Man since the 60s, right? Spider-Man isn't actually that old.
Yep.
Spider-Man's only 20 years older than we are. He's not that old. But if you look at, say, other intellectual properties, right? A Star Wars or a Lord of the Rings or a Star Trek, right? I guess Star Trek is kind of actually up there in terms of number of Star Trek stories told. But
it is now, but only recently because of a Star Trek explosion.
Right. But it's like because Spider-Man was a comic and there were Spider-Man TV shows, movies, it's like in that time and the number of people involved, right? Because it wasn't always just like one person doing it. It's like as an artistic collective, right, of all of society around the world, right, but mostly in North America, but in the English-speaking world, but also in other parts of the world, right, we humans of today have a lot of fucking practice drawing Spider-Man.
Yep.
Right? It's like, we are really fucking good at Spider-Man. We practice that shit for
Spider-Man is one of the most recognizable characters in the history of the observed universe.
He's not up there with the Mario and Mickey Mouse, but he's way up there.
Yeah.
Way up there.
If you go wherever you live, go out in the street and ask a random person if they know who Spider-Man is. They will almost definitely know.
Depends, but it's likely, right? And so with all that practice at making Spider-Man, right? It's like normally you look at like other intellectual properties that have lots of adaptations and retellings and remixes and sequels and prequels, right? And what ends up happening is they come out with a different style, a different take, a different, like at Batman movies, right? Each one is like a different take, a different style, another one, right? But there's still just another one, right? It's like they might do a better job of it, right? But they're doing a better job of doing the same thing.
Yep.
Right?
Like I did not need to see another Batman origin story. I don't give a shit. I have no
It's not even just the story being the same, right? It's just even if you do the origin story again, right? Or whether you don't, it's still just another Batman movie, right? Even if you do a great job of it, it's still another Batman movie. And what they've done here in Spider-Verse, right, is they say, look, we're not just going to make another Spider-Man, right? And they get into a meta commentary.
Oh yeah, this movie is about Spider-Man, the concept.
Right. It's like they get into a meta commentary about like, look, in every Spider-Man universe, there are certain things that happen, right? It's not spoilers, right? There's an Uncle Ben that dies.
Yep.
There's
with great power comes great responsibility. Spider-Man tries to save everybody, and maybe he can't.
Right. There's a Gwen Stacy type of character. There's a married, right? There's certain, even whenever anyone does a Spider-Man, you can go read all the different renditions of Spider-Man, and they have these common threads between them. Right? And those,
you realize what you did there, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, making sure.
And those common threads, right, between all the different Spider-Man stories mean that all of them are still just another Spider-Man story, right?
But they're also connected in this fundamental way.
It's another person playing the same song in their own way. And in here, right, what they've done in Spider-Verse is they say, look, right, we're going to go meta and recognize that, first of all, right, which is with the meta trend these days.
I mean, I think the ultimate villain is canon as a concept.
Sure. And then, not only that, right, but we are going to simultaneously produce a work, right, that is still a Spider-Man story, right? You can't say it's not, but is also not, right? It is not just another Spider-Man story.
Partly because it is also every Spider-Man story, but it's also the Spider-Man story, but it's also this artistic thing.
We have practiced at doing Spider-Man so much, right? We have now found a way to take it to another level and to another place, right? And this is what I think the other intellectual properties are lacking. Star Wars, I think, is the chief among
Star
them,
Wars
right?
is the primary villain of just make another one being the wrong way to go.
Star Wars, they haven't practiced making as many Star Warses as they have Spider-Mans, right? Even though there's been plenty of books and comics and video games and things like that, it's like there's a lot more practice. Spider-Man's a bit older too, but there's been a lot more Spider-Man practice going on by artistic creators in the world. And so they have found a way to take Spider-Man and evolve to a new form and not just make another one, right? And so I think that's really special, and all the other intellectual properties got to take note, right? It's like, what if we saw the Spider-Verse of Star Wars, or the Spider-Verse of Lord of the Rings, or I don't know, what other intellectual properties out there that are super popular.
I mean, there aren't that many of them, but
right?
Indiana Jones even. There aren't that many of them, but...
Right, it's like, no one's taking Indiana Jones to like a new level.
Indiana Jones, they're literally just making more Indiana Joneses.
Right. It's like you're doing, renditions and remixes and whatnot are one thing. Right?
But I think that is what makes this movie special, to the point that we're breaking one of our cardinal rules of praising something to too high of a degree too soon after we saw it. Usually we're like, oh, this anime might be S tier, but we got to wait a couple decades to make sure.
No, I can tell you right now.
And I think it's the confluence of the revolutionary artistic process and style coupled with the new way of telling a Spider-Man story that you described are both in the same trilogy at the same time. And I think that opening scene in the Guggenheim and that moment is a flex on the level of when Cowboy Bebop had the balls to say, yeah, we made a new genre right now.
Yeah.
Fuck you.
Pretty much. Right?
Like, I have no notes about this movie, and it's long. Like, it is over 2 hours long, which I did not know going into it. And it just washed over me.
It was going to be a long, it's going to be that long. I thought it was, I could sort of tell it was going to be to be continued. Spoiler, whatever.
Yep.
Right? It's like, you know, because I'm like, there's no way they can resolve all this given it's already been an hour.
Well, considering
right?
that it is 140 minutes of raising the stakes and raising questions. The thing this movie does, unlike Spider-Man 1, which had a lot more downtime and slow beats, which were sort of setting up the characters, this one almost does the same thing at Punch Drunk Love or the second half of Escaflowne do, where it just accelerates and accelerates and accelerates, and every moment it's just throwing more at you and adding more complication and expanding what it's about, and then at this breakneck speed, it hits a brick wall. To be continued credits.
Yep. I thought the to be continued was gonna come. I was getting that feeling.
Yep.
It was gonna come.
I thought it was gonna come about a half hour before it did.
It came way later than I thought it was gonna come. So like I was right that I guessed correctly that there's no way it was gonna finish in the one movie once it had been on long enough. But I guessed wrong. I was like, whoa, 2 hours, right? It's like, what other animations are that long? Well, we looked it up.
This is the longest.
It's longer than Fantasia.
This is the longest animated feature ever made by an American studio, and it's one of the longest animated films of all time. It is beaten by a Hungarian animated film that took like 30 years to make that we just learned about.
Yep. And there's an anime movie in this corner of the world that I guess maybe we should watch. The original version of that movie was only 129 minutes. But there was in 2019 an extended edition released that's 168 minutes, and so that beats Spider-Verse. So Spider-Verse is in third place.
Now I suspect. Now I haven't seen that other movie, but if I had to guess, that movie per minute is not as good or entertaining as Spider-Man.
No, there is no right. It's like this Spider-Man movie for its incredible length, right? It's like.
The only, like, this was a better value than when we saw the Powerpuff Girls movie for 25 cents in the theater.
I thought it was 50 cents.
50 cents? I forget. I think we each spent 25 cents, so we said 50 cents.
50 cents each.
I don't remember. That was like 20 years ago.
The point is like, it's like, I think I forget what I was talking about when I said this, but I was like, oh, it's like a delicious meal, but there's so much of it, and then you get full and you don't want any more, right? It's just like 10 steaks, right?
If this had been 4 hours long and just kept going, I wouldn't have even blinked.
This is like a 50-course meal, and somehow every course is delicious, and you have room for more. And
you're like reaching for the dessert menu again.
Never full. It's like just bring a different meal, and you eat that different meal, and it's the most delicious one. And somehow I'm still hungry, and they bring another one, and I want another one after that somehow.
Finally, you're like Homer in the seafood restaurant. You try to get more food, and then suddenly the waiter's like, sorry, we're closed, and they just kick you out. There isn't even a stinger after the credits. It just ends on a to be continued, and it is 0.25 Escaflowne's worth of a cliffhanger.
Maybe I should just go to the theater and see it again.
I would watch it again in the theater. I saw.
Just go over there whenever the hell I want.
I went and saw the first Spider-Verse in the theater twice. That's how good it was.
I can just go over and watch it again. No one can stop me.
Hell, if the first Spider-Verse is in the theater again, I'd watch that there again. This movie is already on my very short list of movies like Star Wars or The Matrix, where if I see even a few seconds of it and nothing's stopping me, I might just watch it to the end. Like, if you put it on a screen, it's like a basilisk. It'll trap me.
And there's another one that's coming?
Yeah.
We're going to get another one?
If that other one's also 140 plus minutes, like,
Yeah. It's going to come like March.
It is.
Or whatever.
It's weird.
At least that's what I heard.
It is weird for you and I on Geek Nights because we have a reputation for being kind of old, cynical nerd guys to be so hype about this movie. And like, I'm still riding that high.
I mean, I'm like, the anti-fan of all the live action superhero movies.
Yeah. I am picky about what I watch, and Scott is like an order of magnitude pickier than me. And the fact that both of us, this movie is 11 out of 10, like, things changed because of this movie. This movie, I'm going to say right now, I think this movie, this trilogy, is going to impact a future generation of creators the way that, like, Star Wars impacted a global generation of creators.
Mm-hmm. this is now this, is this like, I think there's been so many Spider-Man. I think, is this the best Spider-Man of all Spider-Man?
Well, yeah, yes, because it is all Spider-Mans. It's about all Spider-Mans.
It's like, if you have to pick one Spider-Man thing, a comic or a book I've read a Spider-Man book with text, by the way.
Yeah.
They exist. Or a movie or a TV show, right? And you got to pick like one to rule them all. Like, this is the one. This is like, right? This is the best Spider-Man thing that has been made. Better than any Stan Lee Spider-Man. Not that not the other ones aren't good, but it's
a step above. But the fact that it might be the best one and it's about Spider-Man as a concept is a confluence that is exceptional.
Right. I mean, just think about something like, Van Gogh doing sunflowers, right? And it's like, Van Gogh does more sunflowers. He gets better at sunflowers, right? How many people after Van Gogh have done some sunflowers, right? It's like, people have been painting sunflowers for a long time, copying Van Gogh's style, doing it in their own style, right? But it's like, even after how long is Van Gogh? Like 1800, really long time ago, right? Longer ago than Spider-Man, right? Has anyone revolutionized and taken the sunflower painting to a new level, right? Maybe I'm not paying attention to the painting world.
Tell us about the best. What's the best sunflower work of art that was ever made? Let us know in the comments.
I could be missing out on some sunflower out there, right? That I've seen some Van Gogh ones, not all of them, right? But, it's like, but here it's as if, imagine if I come out with a sunflower painting and you could look at it next to the Van Gogh and it's like, looking at a Mario 64 next to a Mario 1. It's like that dramatic difference, right? And that's the difference. You put Spider-Verse next to any previous Spider-Man, and it's like looking at Mario 1 next to Mario 64, right?
Yep.
The difference between them. And it's like to achieve that in a time when people have already had access to all computer animation techniques and such for a long time already, right? To achieve it now, right? It's like, that's something else, right? Rather that you would expect it at a point like with Mario 64, where it's like, we have a new technology available. That's why we were able to go to this new level.
Yep.
But there isn't any particular new technology.
There are a few. There are some tools, some techniques, some processing power.
But
there are things that facilitated this, but other studios have access to those tools, and what's different here is that they decided to push those tools to their limits, while also, it's almost like they sat down as they were putting this together, and continuously everyone was always thinking, how could we push this further at every step of the way?
Right, but with Toy Story, you can point at it and be like, yes, Toy Story was a big dramatic improvement, achievement, etc., but there was a thing happening in the world that allowed that to happen, right? And it's sort of like, Spider-Verse doesn't have some excuse, right? Like that. There's less credit to the computer people, not that there's none, right? And more credit on the artists who have been practicing drawing Spider-Man for 60 years.
So yeah, we've already talked for an hour, so I almost don't even want to get into, I guess we could spend a couple minutes, spoilers, I guess.
The plot is not that important. It's a really solid plot. You care about the characters.
I guess
they're acted well.
Specific scenes or things that, the fact that it's Bagel Guy and how they weave, the villain of the week into calling him a villain of the week becomes the meta plot. Every one of those threads ties so tightly.
It's also about, Spider-Man is all about, these villains of the week.
Yep.
Right. Lots of weird ones. And so to take one I think that's the thing that's been done before, taking a villain of the week and sort of leveling them up to being for real.
Yeah. That's a common trope in Spider-Man comics, in fact.
Yeah. Yeah. It's,
But the style of the Gweniverse, when they're in Gwen's universe, those painterly, diffuse, vague backgrounds everywhere, and how the colors literally change based on the emotional content of what's happening.
You mean like what you do in comic books?
Yeah. Punk Spider-Man might be the best Spider-Man of all time.
Yeah, whoever did the Punk Spider-Man is some sort of genius person, right?
Yeah, that Spider-Man is fantastic.
The mixture of the live action stuff, right?
Yes, pull it, because it's every Spider-Man.
It wasn't
Literally.
They didn't do it. They didn't do it in a Roger Rabbit way, right? They didn't do it in a it's like there's been lots of things that have mixed the live action and the animation previously, right? But this is doing it in like, I guess I've never seen anyone do it quite this way before, right?
Yep. Well, because they're all just Spider-Man, and it was heartfelt. And there's a little aside here that this was the first movie I have seen in a regular multiplex since COVID. Like, I've only gone to...
I've seen quite a few.
I haven't. We've only been going to really boutique theaters. We went to an Alamo Draft House a little bit before this for another movie. But we were in a packed theater, like in a regular old, like, Regal multiplex. And I miss seeing a movie like this where... So occasionally, like, it can be overdone and it can be a problem, but when the crowd just sort of spontaneously all cheers at something at the same time, I do enjoy that feeling, that camaraderie.
Well, so the Woo game usually is like a thing that's like bothersome, right? It's like, oh, you're just getting a cheap cameo in there to make people go woo, right? You got some fan service in there, right? Just to audience pleasers and whatnot, right?
Yep.
And usually, to me, that's cheap. That's not, right?
Every one of these was heartfelt, made sense, fit into the movie.
The ones that they did, right? I think the one that I can point to the most, right, is the Lego one, right?
Yeah.
They bring in Lego Spider-Man, right? A crowd pleaser, right? So it's like they bust out Lego Spider-Man and everyone's like, woo, Lego Spider-Man, right? We love Legos, woo game, right? And so, but the amount of that scene for this Lego Spider-Man is really short.
It's like it's like 6 seconds. Like
30 seconds, less than a minute, right? And here's what's cram-packed into this 30 seconds to a minute of Lego Spider-Man. Number one, they got Woo Game in there. Okay.
Yep.
Right. Number two, they're bringing in stop motion animation into a film that is otherwise computer animated. I'm sure computers are helping in some way, but it's like a whole different animation style, right? That I'm sure that they actually stop motion those Legos with a camera mostly for that scene, right? Three, right? You're bringing in the tired old role of animation as a toy selling machine, right? Because I don't know how well Spider-Man Legos sell, but I bet you they're selling a little better today.
Yeah. I think any Spider-Man thing is selling a little better today.
Right? It's like, they made Spider-Man Legos look cool. That was the best ad for Spider-Man Legos you could ever seen. Because I've looked at those sets and they don't seem really exciting Lego-wise, right? But you know what? I could get just a Spider-Man Lego minifig only, and I would be very happy to get one of those. Right? They bring that in, right? It's relevant to the plot that's happening. So the plot of the movie advances a tiny bit. And, right, they have a great joke, right? In that scene where it's like, you're one of our best. And it's like, right, where he tells the Lego Spider-Man, he's like, you're one of our best Spider-Men. Right? And it's like funny because he's just a little Lego guy. Right? How good could he be? But he's one of the best ones. Right? And they even shows like, I love how it shows like, you also get a little bit of, Spider, because the whole J. Jonah Jameson thing in the newspaper is a big part of most Peter Parker Spider-Mans, and it's not a part of the Miles Morales ones really at all, right? So they can only sneak that into the movie in other places, and I think that's where it featured most prominently in this movie, because you got the Lego Spider-Man, the Lego Peter Parker with his Lego camera in Jameson's office, like, get me pictures of Spider-Man, right? So they wedged that in there too, right? All in a minute. They managed to do all of that, right?
Yep. I think a thing that really
with like a sheet of like meta commentary over the whole thing. Right?
Then we've got the Mumbai-ish Spider-Man story. That whole
I'm pretty sure that Spider-Man I didn't read it, but I think that they didn't like create that for this movie. I'm pretty sure that was in a comic.
But there was a moment, and it was relevant because we were in a theater with a bunch of people, because there's a moment where Spider-Man in that universe has to choose between saving someone on a bus or someone else in a different location. And he tries to save both, which is a common trope in Spider. Like, you see a scene that has happened in a lot of Spider-Man, and there's a moment where a lot of people in the audience, as soon as they saw the framing of that scene, gasped and were like, oh, I know what's going to happen. And the fact that the movie not only inverts that, But the fact that it is inverted is a plot point that is part of the point of the entire trilogy. Like, it is directly relevant to the story. The fact that that went down the way it went down, that was just a sublime, well done, not a misdirection. It was just a good scene.
Yeah. Yeah. So Spider-Man India was in a comic. There was a limited series in 2004, 2005. It was 4 issues. And then Spider-Man India has also, again, reappeared, I guess, like in some cartoons and things like that. But then this is like they brought him back big time. A significant part of the movie is, Spider-Man India.
So yeah, go see this movie. Like the highest possible GeekNights recommendation.
Yeah. It's like, I think we did an episode on Spider-Man, a GeekNights episode on Spider-Man, and I talked about, I think I talked about how, like, I always like Spider-Man, right? It's like, Spider-Man's a New York guy, right?
Yep. Wisecracking.
Like, right. But it's like, you don't think of yourself as like a Spider-Man fan. I'm not out there buying Spider-Man stuff, right? I made fun of that guy at the Comic-Con who only celebrated Spider-Man comics. I never had like Spider-Man Halloween costume, right? But it's like, but when a Spider-Man hits, right? It's like, I remember how much I like Spider. It's like, you don't realize how much you like it. I often criticize other people for not understanding what they like, or not being introspective, or, not knowing why they like what they like, right? And things of that nature. But it's like, I like Spider-Man more than I think I like Spider-Man. Right? Maybe
because you don't think about him day to day, but then a Spider-Man hits and you're like, oh, Spider-Man, I'll go check that out.
Even before the movie came out, it's like somehow I just got in a Spider-Man mood. It's like, but like the other, intellectual properties have not been as successful at, like, the Star Warses didn't get me in a Star Wars mood.
I mean, we're not gushing about the Mario movie like this.
Mario didn't get me in a Mario mood. I'm going to go see that movie, though, at some point.
Oh, yeah. Still in theaters, like all over the place.
But it's like, I was able, like, the fact that I can even have a Spider-Man mood of, like, I'm feeling like Spider-Man. I kind of want to just go get a Spider-Man comic and read it. I'm feeling, like, I can't get that feeling for other, so.
But it just so happens that the Spider-Man we got now is one of the better movies ever made by humans. Like, just go watch this thing.
Yeah, I think you just hang this shit in the Louvre, right?
Just have it playing on a loop in the Louvre.
It wouldn't be wrong. It's probably better than a lot of other shit in the Louvre, right? It's just another pottery that was stolen from someone. I don't know, right? It's like,
all right, I think we should stop there. We've gone on for like an hour and 15 minutes.
That's not as long as the movie.